I want to ask you something. How long have you been swallowing the truth? And I'm not talking about lying or deceiving, just not saying the thing, not asking for what you need, not speaking up when something hurt you, and not letting people see the real version of you because somewhere along the way you learned that being seen was dangerous, that being too much or too honest or too real cost you people, and you simply couldn't afford to lose anyone else. Now, I know that place because I lived there for years. And I've been sitting with this a lot lately, reflecting on how much of my needs I suppressed and how much I used to swallow just to keep people close to me. Welcome back to the Wonders Within podcast. I'm Nikki Denham, founder of Wellness Wonders Australia. And today we are talking about the throat chakra, what it is, what closes it, and what it actually takes to find your voice after years of silence. Now, I want to share with you today a very personal and difficult moment in my past life, the chapter where I lost everyone. Now, during the hardest period of my life, which was my own personal and mental breakdown, I lost the people closest to me, my friends, my family, and my relationships, including my children. And when you lose that much that fast, something happens inside you. Something quietly closes. Because the story your nervous system writes is simple. Speaking up costs you everything. Being too much costs you everything. And being seen, really seen, costs you everything. But if I'm honest, the story didn't begin there. It started much earlier. I grew up with the message that children should be seen and not heard, and I'm pretty sure there's a lot of us who got that in our childhood. But in my childhood, that wasn't just a saying. It was quite literally beaten into us. Having a voice was dangerous, both emotionally and physically. So I learned very early that speaking up wasn't safe, that having an opinion could have serious consequences, and that expressing how I felt could make things worse. So I became quiet. I learned to read a room, and I believe that this is where my empathic abilities started. And I learned when to speak and when not to. And I learned to swallow things before they ever made it to my mouth. And when you're a child, you don't think, I'm developing a trauma response. You think, this is how I stay safe. So the little girl learned to survive by becoming smaller. But then I grew up, and life gave me relationships and experiences that reinforced the same lesson in different ways. Now, when I lost people later in life, especially the people closest to me, that old belief became even stronger. Speaking up costs you everything. So I made myself easy, helpful, and no trouble at all. If something was hard, I didn't say it. If a conversation needed to happen, I avoided it. And if I felt something uncomfortable, I buried it because the terror of someone leaving again was bigger than anything I needed to say. Now, I made myself worthy of people staying by making myself extremely helpful and likable. And I told myself that was fine, that I was protecting people and that I was keeping the peace. But what I was really doing was abandoning myself every single day. And I think that's where I began to understand the throat chakra differently. Because maybe my voice didn't suddenly disappear as an adult. Maybe I had been learning to silence it for most of my life. Now, the throat chakra is the energy center of truth, of voice, and of authentic expression. And mine had been closed for so long that I had almost forgotten that it existed. And the thought of a public platform absolutely paralyzed me. The thought of speaking my truth out loud about my childhood, about the relationships, about the things that were done to me and the things I survived, it truly paralyzed me. Because what if they judged me? What if they blamed me? What if they left? And then slowly something shifted in me. From here, I became deeply invested in the spiritual work, both in sessions with my coach, Diana, and also my solo practices at home. And it's the kind of work that takes you inward to places that you haven't visited in years, if at all. Now, I'm a very, very visual person. So one meditation session, I saw in my mind's eye myself carrying a large backpack. Now, it was full of huge boulders, heavy, big, round, black. Now, I had been carrying this backpack for so long, and I mean metaphorically, that I'd stopped noticing the weight of it. It was just a part of my everyday world. And in that moment, in that session, I decided to put it down. I took each boulder out one by one and held them, and then set them on the ground. This one, shame, not mine. This one, guilt, not mine. This one, rage, not mine. This one, fear, not mine. One by one, each one named, each one placed on the ground where it belonged. I put the empty backpack back on my back and I walked away. And as I walked, I looked back at those boulders sitting in there in the distance, and I knew that they were never mine to carry. The shame wasn't mine. The silence wasn't mine. The hiding wasn't mine. It all belonged to a story that was never truly mine, not to who I am. People often talk about the throat chakra opening as though it happens in a single moment, but that's not how it happened for me. It opened slowly over years of choosing truth over silence, of meeting myself with honesty instead of avoidance, of doing the deep, uncomfortable work. Now, that visualization wasn't the beginning of my healing. It was the moment I realized I no longer needed to carry a voice that had never belonged to me in the first place. I was finally ready to speak with my own. So let me explain what the throat chakra actually is, because it isn't just spiritual language. There is something very real happening here. The throat chakra is the fifth energy center, light blue, and sits at the throat and governs communication, truth, and authentic expression. When it is open and flowing, you speak with clarity. You say what you mean, you ask for what you need, you tell the truth, even when it's uncomfortable, because you trust that your voice has value. Now, when it is blocked, which happens when we have been silenced, criticized, shamed, or when speaking up has cost us something, we lose access to that. We swallow our words. We people please. We perform a version of ourselves that feels safe rather than real. And here's what I'd like you to understand. A blocked throat chakra is not a character flaw, and it is not a weakness. It is a very intelligent response to an environment where speaking your truth was not safe. Your silence made sense because it protected you, but you're not in that environment anymore. And the voice that learned to stay quiet, she has something to say. So if silence made sense once, the real question is, how do you actually open it back up? And again, this is just my personal experience because it wasn't just one thing for me. It was a handful of layers and they built on each other. So first of all, the inner child work, going back and meeting the little girl who learned that her voice caused problems, telling her she is safe now, that she's allowed to speak. This is the layer underneath everything else, and skipping it is why so many people can say the right words and still not feel free. Secondly, it's the somatic work, moving through the body, releasing what's been stored there for decades. A closed throat chakra doesn't just live in your thoughts. It lives in your shoulders, your jaw, your chest, your hips. You can't think your way out of it. You have to move through it. Third, the daily practice. So I'm talking about the meditations, the journaling, and the breath work, layer by layer that makes it safe to feel things again. Not one big breakthrough, 100 small ones stacked on top of each other until one day you notice that the weight is gone. And finally, the decision. A decision that this story is not your shame to hide. I share mine now proudly, and I share it because I believe with everything that I have that someone needs to hear it. That somewhere a woman is carrying the same backpack, swallowing the same truth, making herself smaller and easier and less so that people will stay. And I want her to know you are allowed to put it down. Your story is not something to be ashamed of. It is evidence of everything you have survived. And the voice you've been silencing, she is not a liability. She is your greatest gift. Here is what I would love for you to sit with this week. So grab your journal, find a quiet moment, and ask yourself, where have I been silent when I need to speak? What truth have I been swallowing to keep the peace or to keep people close? And what would I say if I knew I wouldn't be judged for it? Write it down, and not for anyone else, just for yourself. And then if you can come back to it once more before the end of the week, not to judge what you wrote, just to notice whether anything has shifted, even slightly, in how it feels to see it there on the page. Because sometimes the first act of finding your voice is letting it exist on paper. You don't have to say it out loud yet. You just have to stop pretending it isn't there. If this episode resonated and if you recognized yourself in the silence, in the shrinking, or in the swallowing of words, I hope you'll stay connected with me. I share reflections on nervous system healing, throat chakra work, somatic practices, and the journey of finding your voice over on my social media. It's a space where these conversations continue with gentle reminders that healing isn't about becoming someone new. It's about remembering who you've always been. If something in today's episode spoke to your heart, I'd love to hear from you. Come and say hello, share your thoughts, or simply follow along as we continue this journey together. You'll find all of my social media links in the show notes. Now, before I leave you today, I want to share something personal. The fact that I'm sitting here recording this podcast, sharing my story, and using my voice in the hope that it helps another woman find her way back to herself is something that still feels incredibly powerful to me. Because there was a time where I didn't have a voice. Not because I had nothing to say, but because I'd spent too much of my life afraid. Afraid of being too much, afraid of being misunderstood, and afraid of what might happen if I spoke my truth. I learned to shrink, I learned to stay quiet, and I learned to swallow the words that wanted to come out. And now here I am, speaking, sharing, and being seen. Not because the fear disappeared overnight, but because I chose to do the work. I chose to meet the parts of myself that had been silenced. I chose to create safety within myself so that my voice finally had somewhere to land. And if sharing my journey can remind even one woman that she's allowed to take up space and that her story matters and that her voice is worth hearing, then every single step of this journey has been worth it. And I'll leave you with this. Your voice matters. Not a performance of it, not a polished, people-pleasing version of it, but the real one. The one that has been waiting underneath all the silence and all the shrinking and all the swallowing. She has been patient and she has waited a long time, but she hasn't gone anywhere. Pick up your journal this week, let her speak there first, and trust that the rest will follow. And remember, you are not too much, you never were. Until next time, bye for now.